Hello, I'm Paul Cowling with Film Independent, and welcome to this week's Coffee Talk. For those who don't know us, Film Independent is the organization behind the Spirit Awards and many year-round screenings and events, most of which, of course, are all online now, but you can check us out at filmindependent.org. Membership is open to everyone. Today's guests are both Spirit Award winners, good friends of Film Independent, and so I'll do my intros quickly and hand it over to them. First up, she's the writer-director of the indie classic Slums of Beverly Hills, The Savages, which was Oscar nominated for Best Screenplay and won Best Screenplay at the Spirit Awards. And most recently, Private Life, also Spirit Award nominated. And she also wrote the screenplay for the Nick Hornby adaptation of Nick Hornby's novel, Juliet Naked. Tamara Jenkins is with us. Hey, Tamara.
Hi.
How you doing?
I'm good.
Are you in New York, right?
I'm in New York City. I wasn't in New York City for a while, and so I've returned to urban life after being, I was staying at a friend's house in the North Fork as a kind of COVID sanctuary, but now I'm here. It's very different.
I bet. I'm glad you could join us. And joining Tamara is, he's the Spirit Award winning director of Quinceañera, which won the John Cassavetes Award. The Oscar winner still Alice. Colette, also Spirit Award nominated for the screenplay for that. And most recently, Earthquake Bird, Wash Westmoreland is here. Hey, Wash.
Hello, Paul. Hello, Tamara.
Hi. Don't we have to mention something that we didn't organize the shirt thing because
that just shows that we're already in tune with each other.
So in tune.
The same shirt.
Gingham. That is really funny.
That is very funny.
This is what happens in lockdown. You resort to gingham.
Yeah. It's like you're like having a picnic on your own body. Because you can't really do it out there, so you just kind of like, I'm gonna put a sandwich
crazy
on my
fantasy world. You make it nice.
Exactly.
Wash, you are in LA, right?
Yes, I'm in LA at home.
Okay. So the way this works is I'm going to step off this virtual stage for about half an hour and let the two of you chat. Similar to how actually both of you were the last participants in the real life coffee talk we did, the last in-person coffee talk we did at the LA Film Festival a couple of years ago.
Oh, really?
And that, yeah.
Wait, that one we did with Karen Kasama?
Was the last in-person one we did, yeah.
Oh, wow, that's incredible.
Yeah.
And that's how we know each other, really.
That's how we met. We met on stage, thanks to you.
Yeah. And then we were on the same circuit for a while because Private Lives and Colette were both, part of that conversation that year. Yes. So we went to a few awardsy type parties together.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is always you were a what's something in the storm? What's the word? The something in the storm. Like in the chaos, I was like, there's Wash.
Safe harbor, I'll take
safe harbor, yeah. In that kind of madness of those things.
I'm pleased we could make that introduction. So I'm going to step off stage. I'll be back in about half an hour with some questions. Anyone tuning in, if you have questions for our guests, use the Q&A button at the bottom of the screen, and we'll get to those later on. But for now, I'll leave you to it.
Thanks, Paul. See you in a bit. Tamara, how are you doing?
Oh my God, I'm okay. I'm, I don't know. I don't know. I'm weird, like everybody, I guess. Are you, well, you're in LA, which is like switched from being a good place to a troubled place in terms of all this stuff, COVID.
Yeah, we had a moment where things looked like they were getting better and now things are getting worse again. And I think this might be the yo-yo that we're all on for a long time.
I know, because I keep thinking, is that what's going to happen here? Because the cities like New York is, it's like we've got a good grade, but I'm waiting for like Cuomo to start wagging his finger. And
it is kind of amazing what New York's done, though. It's kind of,
it is amazing, but it's also like false. I mean, it feels sort of like, okay, like we're doing this. And I sat outside with my husband and we like ate something, among other human beings, outside distanced, but it is still strange. And I was like, so this is okay, right? Because we haven't been in the city for like 3 months. So anyway, it seems like it's so easy to become, to forget,
Yeah.
But most New Yorkers are walking around with masks on, although somebody in my building here, I just like swung open the door and he was like yammering on the phone in the public hallway. I just spewed what is it? Droplets, spraying droplets.
Oh, no, you become so aware of all those droplets.
I know, there's droplets in the hall. I can't go to the hall. So I had to write a letter to my landlady.
It's like the safe sex years with all those body fluids and like, oh, molecules might be moving somewhere. And, you think about that now with breath, which is a very strange circumstance.
Yeah.
And, we're all in this science fiction movie.
Yeah, we're all
trying to make the best of it.
I mean, you can't stop thinking about safe.
Right. That is really a profound influence on right now.
It's like floating around, like every once in a while I'll see somebody, there was somebody on the street yesterday so covered, I mean, in such a kind of eccentric way, like black turtleneck. It's hot, it's summer. A black turtleneck and like almost maybe like socks going up their arm and like a this and it was so, Julianne Moore.
So totally now.
Yeah, it's very now. It's a great look. So anyway, it's a movie that it's kind of interesting. The movie. Feeling of everything, that everything feels slightly like we're in something.
Yeah, like there's a bit, like you're watching movies, but there's a bigger narrative going on outside, It sort of contextualizes everything in a very different way. And, when you watch movies and people are embracing or hanging out in restaurants, you're like, wow. It kind of activates this thing of how quickly everything has changed and, how there's a new set of rules now. And it will be referred to like, kind of like my grandparents used to refer to the Second World War. And I thought it was like ended 2 years ago because they talked about it all the time. And it was such a reference point for them in the way they saw the world. And I think this will be the same with this COVID. I think it's going to cause this huge sea change in society, culture, the arts, everything.
Yeah. I think it's so interesting because if you think about like science fiction or that create worlds in which something like this occurs, the thing that I'm finding about the reality of it is just how mundane and how striking these mundane images are, like somebody's mask that's been tossed on the sidewalk and stepped on, or, signs that are, signs in front of the playground that say, this is an unsterilized playground, so, make sure your kids, whatever, don't touch it. And just all the kind of mundane aspects of it are so interesting in terms of, like, if you were to turn this into, something for a movie.
Or if, as a screenwriter in 2019, you'd been writing a pandemic script, and would you have come up with anything like what's happened, like, the whole toilet roll thing that just obsessed people forever, and, the sort of smaller things that become massive in these times, but very much sort of have a mundane quality, but then also this very surreal quality.
Right, I know, it's so heightened, but it's like you see it in the details that are like, because things almost look normal. And also because it's summer. So, I mean, in New York, that's a big deal because you're not wearing a coat and it's green and so it looks like fun.
Mm-hmm.
But it's...
Yeah, it can be very deceptive, can't it? Yeah. I think it is a really interesting screenwriting exercise because often if you imagine America in pandemic, you might come up with something super dystopian and everyone running around with guns. Well, maybe that's coming up at the end of the summer. But, like the beginning of Alien, Ridley Scott's film, when they're all sat around, they're all just complaining about what shifts they're working and what pay they're working. You're like, oh God, this is what it would be like on a long space voyage. You would just be bored shitless, Right. And so, that started that film off in this really interesting way. And I think for the pandemic, it's kind of like, oh, who would have imagined it would be this everyday quotidian stuff, but so weird at the same time.
Yeah, and scary. And I mean, it is true, you know, when you think of scary movies, you don't think of Bright and Sunny Days, although really great, you know, I guess directors that are defying the expectations of what a horror movie is or what like David Lynch, you know, who I also keep thinking about all the time, because when I was in this place in Long Island called, anyway, on the North Fork of Long Island, there's people with yards and little, you know, and they're out there gardening and mowing and with their flowers, and it's very, you know, it's very Blue Velvet, like drifting through an environment that's so picturesque, but there's something rumbling underneath it. And anyway, that's something that...
David Lynch is doing the weather forecast every day in LA right now. He comes on the radio and he goes, "It's gloomy right now, but in the afternoon there will be beautiful golden sunshine." And you're really, it's the perfect thing for right now. You're like, oh my God, David Lynch is reading the weather. It really... Where
does that happen? What station? Like what?
KCRW run it. Yeah.
So
which has been a lifeline. It's a really great radio station for, you know, for the community here to keep everyone a little more sane. Yeah, but it's nice to have David Lynch telling you it's going to be sunny. Hey, so what have you been up to? Have you been writing? Have you been dreaming? Have you been stressing?
I'm stressing. I'm scared that you're going to be incredibly productive when the conversation turns around to you. I've been, I mean, I feel like there's been so many sort of seasons of this COVID, like, so chapters. The first chapter for me, because I have a kid, was homeschooling and Zoom schooling and like being a teacher.
Yeah, huge.
And it was really exhausting, and like it takes a lot of work. You can't just leave them alone. I mean, a 10-year-old, at least I couldn't. So there was a lot of work in taking care of this kid who's been suddenly thrown into online learning and stuff. So anyway, that was really disorienting, and that went on for a really long time. It was like a whole semester of school.
Of course, yeah.
And then that ended. I mean, I'm only just becoming, you know, mentally functional, like in a, you know, like trying to write and trying to, because I'm having a little time because she's actually visiting friends that are sequestered somewhere. So it is like the first time I'm alone. I'm in my office. I, you know, walk to my office like I used to, and which is strange because the building's pretty empty, except now there's people in this hall. So I'm just kind of returning to like all my my notebooks and such, and my pads, and like I have like, you know, like vague, you know, like I had some ideas a long time ago that I was, you know, so I'm just kind of almost like dusting off all the little impulses.
Right.
Yeah. I'm not deep in, I've been really having a hard time landing on the thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, it is a sort of time for just sort of trying out different ideas in your mind, isn't it? And sort of feeling it out, because there's no sure date where it's all going to start again. So it very much puts you in a more sort of abstract place when you're writing. So we should all be writing things with two people, like a remake of My Dinner with Andre that can be shot this year. But of course, you know, there will be new art forms that come out of this that are on Zoom or are, you know, very, very chamber piecey in tone.
Are you writing in that? I mean, I have to say that even before the COVID times, I was sort of having a hard time landing on what thing that I wanted to do. So I was trying to when I'm being my best self, I just try to write scenes of things to rub two sticks together to see if something's coming out. And so, but then this happened, which added to my inability to sort of commit to like an idea or thing. And so, but I haven't been thinking that way, like, oh, I have to write something.
No, I mean, yeah, it's difficult, isn't it?
A Seymour thing.
It's already difficult to know what you want to do, and then to have the whole thing about what's possible is probably an added challenge. And maybe you just have to think, oh, in 2021, when things start going again, you know, this will be possible again, to have extras walking by each other and to have actors kiss each other and, you know, all that stuff that is now such a problem. Yeah. Speaking
of art forms that are coming out of the COVID world, did you see the Public Theater? There's a play. It's called, what was it called? It's The Apple Family. It's anyway, it was a play, and it happened like a month ago. And it was, and the play's context was a Zoom call, and like a family meeting on a Zoom call, and all these dynamics, and it was really good. And now I can't remember what the friggin' thing was called, but it's a playwright who has they're called the Apple Family, and he's done plays before with this family. It's like a cycle of plays, and then he just dropped it into this environment, and it was really fascinating.
It would, yeah. I mean, I always think the most dramatic thing that can ever happen in a film is what's coming out of someone's mouth next. You know, that's potentially extremely dramatic. And, you know, yeah, you could get a Zoom call in a family that suddenly turns very, very dark or very interesting or reveals stuff. I mean, it's all there as though people were in the same room round a table, right? So
yeah, and it was live. I didn't see the live version. I saw the taped version, but it was, you know, actors were sent the script, and because the actors already had played these parts, because these parts had existed, because these characters existed in advance of this for the playwright also, there was like density to it, even though I'd never seen those plays or I didn't know who these people were. And you know, it wasn't just language, it was also the behavior of a Zoom call, like, you know, coming in and being late, and all of the physicality that, oh, I got to get something, you know, the reality of what that would be like, or it opened in a very brilliant way. It was the first person who showed up on the call, and she's looking at herself.
Oh, right, that's what you do, don't you? You go like this. It's
like a private moment. She's doing it, so the acting is really, it's like a real private moment of like, oh my God, what do I look like? You know, like a mirror moment or something, but in this thing, and then people started coming in. So it wasn't just language, it was physical, it had behavior, it had, you know, in one frame there were two people because the brother came to stay with the sister for quarantine. Anyway, it was just it was the first thing that I saw that was like and then it got a review in the New Yorker, a review in the New York Times, like it was a play. Because
you could even work a freeze frame into it there, just at the right or the wrong moment. Someone, you know.
What you say? Yeah.
Exactly. Sorry, can't hear you. Say that again. You know, I've been doing all these pitches on Zoom, and it's quite difficult because, you know, there'll be like 3 or 4 people come on from, you know, the company, and then there's 2 or 3 people on my side, and so you either look at the gallery, which is a little intimidating when you're pitching, or what I kind of do is just watch yourself, because then you can't be put off by anyone's, like, you know, checking a phone or like yawning, you know, it's just going to completely throw you. So just kind of go totally into like, you know, the project, but just looking at the mirror when I'm doing it. So it's quite an odd way to pitch, to say the least.
Like, how many of those have you done? Several?
Well, I've just started with this project that I've been developing with a British filmmaker called Christine Clark, and I can't really talk about it because it's just kind of going out. But she's in London, and you know, I'm in LA, and often the people are in New York, so there's all the time zone thing and everything, and syncing everything up. And then my producing partner Victor runs the visuals, so he'll like do this thing where he takes over everyone's screen and puts some images up during the pitch.
So it's like, these are inspirations, this is the kind of, that kind
of
thing?
Like you'd normally have a book and...
No, right, like a mood board.
Mood book, Yeah, because you know, someone talking for, you know, half an hour, whatever, on a Zoom call, you're going to have to need, like, either got to be the most brilliant speaker on earth, or you need a little support from the visuals, the sort of atmospheres, the inspirations, all that kind of stuff. So he'll be running that while me and Christine are pitching in turn. So it's kind of quite a little dog and pony show we got going.
Wow, that sounds good.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's evolving into its own art form, the Zoom pitch, because before you would have never worked out quite a lot of these technical things of how to make this work. But I think that's going to happen more often. I think that sort of like catching a flight to go and do a meeting on a PowerPoint thing will all be now Zoom. I think there'll be a lot less flying around post-COVID, which is good.
It's like the end of, remember when everything was FedEx? Like right. You FedEx your script?
Right, when it was a physical script, yeah. And or going down to Kinko's with your draft script,
and then
collating them and then checking there's no blank pages in there and all that stuff. That's gone, right?
But there was something about the ritual of like putting it in and sealing it up and like, okay, it's going out there.
I know, but there's also that bummer of like, kind of, you got it all printed out and you got home and you're looking through it and you notice like a spelling mistake on page 1 and you're like, I'm going to die. Whereas at least now if it's a PDF, that's an easier fix.
Yeah, you can tell them. It's like, no, it's this one. That was the wrong draft. But that's an interesting thought that it's going to alter the whole, that's what people will do now. That they will, I mean, just like people aren't going to be in offices anymore, or, you know, the reduction of having to be in the real world with people, which is also really depressing.
Yeah, exactly. Like take the advantages of like that people do enjoy working at home a few days a week, and that people do function well when they kind of have a certain isolation sometimes to be creative, and work that back into, you know, the regular work schedules when things get going. Because LA has, you know, too much traffic and too much commuting, and, you know, that could all become better a little bit with people working at home. And I think sometimes people really enjoy working at home. I read this thing in the New Yorker and they said, oh, if you're a writer, you're always in quarantine. So like, that's quite a good slogan, that there's something about, you know, being on your own, switching everything off and just tunneling down that is, you know, part of the way of doing it. And that's kind of become exaggerated during the pandemic when, you know, social life has dropped off and the inbox is more empty and there's, you know, the day becomes simpler. So there's more time in theory for creating. Yeah,
if you're not refreshing the news constantly.
Oh yeah, well, that is the most terrifying thing on earth, and you know, I'm sure we could talk about that for hours, but I honestly find just mentally, just to get into what I'm writing or whatever, it's one of the best ways to keep that at bay for a few hours and, you know, escape it for a while, you know, because there's so much scary stuff happening politically. And then there's so much brilliant stuff happening politically, of course, with all the marches and the Black Lives Matter movement and the, you know, the way America has turned, and the way the virus in many ways shows the worst things about capitalism really starkly, like the inequality and the lack of healthcare and the, you know, lack of a kind of collaborative public spirit in some ways. So I think all that stuff is going to change the way people think, in the same way 9/11 sent people to the right. I've got to hope that the pandemic's going to send people to the left.
Yeah, to like care about each other a little bit.
Care about each other and be more aware of, you know, other people's lives.
And how some sort of way to hold people so when there is catastrophe, they don't all fall through the cracks. I don't know. But so that means so what you're telling, you're suggesting is that you've been very productive.
I've been trying to be, and then you don't want to beat yourself up too much if you're not. I've also been getting really into meditating because I need to sort of switch off and try and be a little more like, you know, you don't have to produce, you know, X number of pages a day. You can just be, you know, a little more calm because you don't know when it's starting, and you know it's taking the deadline off creating, so you can go more at your own pace, I feel. And then also I'm looking forward to seeing what work comes out of this period, because I think there's something about the end of the world that makes you dig a little deeper into what you really want to say and what you really want to write and what you're really connecting to. I've been trying to think about, you know, what if I had one film left, what would that film be? And trying to, you know, I'm working on a new project, writing, that is something that's super personal and actually a little connected to Private Lives. It's about my experience of having a child back in the early 90s when I was a donor for a woman who wanted to have a child on her own. So it's maybe a companion piece to Private Lives.
That's so amazing. That sounds fantastic.
Yeah. I'm excited about it. It was a very political time. It was sort of a time of queer political activism in England that was extraordinary, because the Thatcher had introduced this law called Clause 28, or it became Section 28, which was literally saying you cannot teach in schools that homosexuality is normal, and you cannot pretend that gay people have pretended family relationships, and that even local libraries weren't allowed to stock books that said positive things about gay people. So there was this huge backlash. And just in seeing what's happening now with, you know, sort of a breaking of awareness around racial issues, and there will be just tremendous work that comes out of that, like my own sort of awakening for my queer sort of, you know, sensibility, if you like, was at that time. And for so many people it was like coming out was kind of political and personal and all intertwined. So it's set in that time, and it's about, while Thatcher's saying no pretend families, it's about two people who are just getting together and just having a family anyway.
Wow. That sounds so, and is that something that you're like deep into, or you're at the beginning of it, or?
I'm really into it. I'm sort of about halfway through, and I'm actually contacting a lot of people on the FaceTimes and talking to them about back in the day, and people are remembering incredible things. So it's like a hive mind coming together to remind, you know, of various events. I mean, there was the stuff that happened that, looking back now, was really extraordinary. It was so homophobic. There was like, we were once in a bar where people were chanting gas the gays, and throwing glasses at us. Like, oh, this, yeah. If it happened today, it would be on the front of the Huffington Post, but it was just part of living in the north of England at that time. So I'm sort of, you know, revisiting that world and thinking about it again. So that's been a very good thing to do during the long, quiet hours of lockdown.
When you're working on something that is truly original, because it's not an adaptation, it's also personal, how do you start? I mean, what do you do? How do you do it? I mean, I know that's a really general question, but no, I'm serious, because when you're lifting something from a personal experience and you're having to shape it into something, I mean, do you have a way in which you kind of start attacking it, or do you know how you're going to attack it first, or do you just start, you know, throwing stuff around and seeing what the juicy
I think there's, you know, it's kind of, this one's been on the tree for a while, you know, it's like a fruit that gets riper and riper, and I just felt it was, I kept revisiting it in my mind every, you know, few weeks for a couple of years, thinking what the shape of it would be. And I guess it was just a feeling of different elements coming together. I started looking up some YouTube videos of stuff that was made at the time, and looking at old photographs of things that were made at the time, and just kind of going into my own little imagination thing for a little while. And then at a certain point, I don't know, you just open the computer one day and I do a pretty detailed outline, and I find during the outline, a lot of stuff that I'll type little lines of dialogue and stuff that'll often end up going into the script, because in a way they're just, you know, the key thought or the key memory that's coming back to you. How about you? Because a lot of your work is based on your own life, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's like, I mean, you know, it's usually like instigated from something in my life, and then I just take, I let fiction take over. But usually the core of it is something personal that, it could be autobiographical, personal, but then I never really think of it as true autobiography, because like I'm reading a memoir right now. In the world of memoir, you can't make stuff up. In the world of memoir, you're saying, this is the truth, this is my story, I'm reading The Liars Club. Did you ever read that?
No.
So good. It's like anyway, it sort of broke the mold open for memoir. I guess it was in the 90s, but it's a great, it's a memoir about growing up in Texas, with really crazy, intense parents, but it's brilliant, beautiful writing. But, you can't make things up when you write a memoir. So when people say, oh, is it autobiographical? I'm like, well, it's ish, a little, but it's not a memoir because I make too many things up. I make up characters, and I don't know, like every time I have to write something new, I feel like I've had a stroke, and I don't know I don't remember how to do it. And I know I did it, then I would look and I'm like, oh my God, I made something before. It's possible. Like I kind of black out or something. And then I sometimes even look at my old notebooks that helped me, and I was like, yeah, that was a notebook for that movie. So I guess I don't know what it is. I feel like I am sort of starting over every time. And I think you are, essentially.
Yeah.
But I part of me loses faith each time. It feels like it's, whatever. It's probably, I need to talk to my therapist about it, but it's like a kind of, so I'm in that place right now where I don't know if you were I just write stuff. And it's leaning towards like an event or a personal moment or something, but it has to have legs, it has to have enough stuff in it that it's made that you can turn it into a dramatic.
That's when I used to work with Richard, the wonderful thing was that there were two of us very invested in creating stuff who were very in tune with each other. And so you could just make write pages and pages of stuff. And, sometimes we're like, oh, this is just like nonsense. And he'd be like, oh, actually there's something in there. You know what I mean? And he'd be like the new pair of eyes. And that was a really great approach. Or sometimes I'd write something and I'd think it was brilliant. And he'd go, what is this? What is this shit? I mean, it was like we had this kind of dialogue of filtering that raw creation that you do at the beginning that I really miss. I mean, I really tremendously miss that process with him. And sometimes I've just got to kind of go into my brain and think, what would he say about what I'm working on, or what would his take be, But I think it's about the fearlessness of the initial creativity is about not worrying about the shape or the form or whether it's going to lead anywhere, but just to actually kind of enjoy it as much as you can and get into it as much as you can and just see what happens.
Right, because out of that kind of inchoate sort of, I always feel like you're looking for what you're doing for a long time, like you're accumulating, and I feel like that with movies in general, you have all of these, I mean, it's like you have an impulse to do something and then it emerges what it's about. It's
right.
Not like you go in there with the theme and say, this is the movie about, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
Your body, your preoccupation is telling you something, that you're preoccupied with this moment or this thing in your life or this thing that you saw, and you're drawn to it and you don't really know why.
Yeah.
And if it has, why is it calling me? What is it? What's in there? Does it have enough juice in there? What am I so I feel like I'm searching.
Yeah. Juice is the key word. There's got to be sort of a richness to it that sort of keeps your fascination there. And I think that's something that happens over the time period that you're writing. You keep looking at it from different ways until you realize that it does have this content that will, create something worthwhile. It's interesting what you said about taking something from real life and then inventing on top of it, because that's, part of this process is I'm wondering, maybe I'll just completely invent this thing. And then other times I'm like, this will be kind of almost like a recreation of exactly what happened. And it's sort of, I think you have to not be like beholden to the truth, the reality of what happened, or who someone exactly was, or what someone exactly would have said, because you have a higher allegiance, and that's to the story. And if you're just so busy kind of, recreating your own life, it can get a little solipsistic and a little navel-gazy, and you just kind of, create something that doesn't reach out. And I think the process of inventing new stuff and turning it into a narrative is about reaching out and making it connect to stronger and deeper story elements that'll carry those themes through to the end.
Do we have to stop?
Paul's just appeared.
Did you see, then there's on the other, did you see Souvenir?
I thought Souvenir was fantastic, yeah.
And that was so devotional to what occurred, because she used letters and she was recreating, and she was so strict about it that it had this great feeling because of that.
Right, it did.
It was like a strange, it was jewel box of memory.
It was, it wasn't, and her choice of what scenes where the scenes began and ended was really interesting, because often it wouldn't be the most dramatic thing. Often, which is what a writer tends to do, is make a beeline for the drama. And sometimes she'd cut to like, this happened after the dramatic thing, and they're just processing it. I thought there was a lot of really, really inventive stuff in that film, and a lot of really interesting stuff about class politics and finding your identity within that, which was really interesting. So yeah, I can't wait for Souvenir 2. I'm already in the line.
I know, very cool. I wonder if she had it in the can before this. I think she did, because I think she.
Yes, she did. I think they shot them. Yeah, because I met her at a thing in London last year, and she was saying yes, they delayed it for a year, so I guess it'll be coming out later this year.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
You have time for some questions?
Oh yeah,
sure. Yeah, of course.
To break this up.
Does that mean like we can see the people asking the question?
No, they'll be off camera. So
okay.
Yeah. So it's
like a radio show.
Exactly.
Right.
Caller number 23.
While we're waiting for people to submit questions, and you should use the Q&A button at the bottom. I have a question for both of you, actually. It's interesting, Tamara, what you're saying about just not knowing how to start an original screenplay. How does that compare to adaptation? You both adapted novels. Is it pretty obvious how you kind of break the back of a story and lay it all out, or how's that process differ? Yeah.
Well, there's stuff there. When you're starting from zero, it's just a very more, but it's not always obvious. And my husband is a screenwriter, and he works with Alexander Payne, and they've done lots and lots of adaptations. So I'm no expert, but I think you have to crack it apart and find that book was, ultimately the movie had so many writers on it, Juliet Naked, but it was there were like, we made the first draft of the book, but then it went through different incarnations. So when I saw it, I didn't know what it was going to be, and I didn't recognize a lot of it, but some of it. And so that's a very surreal experience. But we had a really hard time in our version of it finding the core of it or something. And I guess, yeah, it is different. You're starting with something that has a shape, but it doesn't mean that it's going to dictate the shape of the movie, because it's a sprawling book. And I think that there's I wish somebody would throw a book that would be but I want a book. Give me a book that is like connecting to me that I could, because finding something that you're in love with that pre-exists. I mean, that was a job, so that was a different kind of, it wasn't like I found it, somebody came to us, would you like to do this? So we took it on. So, but, then you make things for different reasons. But I don't have, Wash is more, Wash is, interpreted people's lives that pre-existed, like Colette.
It's true. I had 3 films that were all basically from women writers, with Still Alice, with Lisa Genova, who was like, so generous about the adaptation and, gave us nothing but support with all the changes we wanted to make. And then Colette, essentially, all her books were about her own life. So that was, about digging into her work and adapting that and trying to stay as close as possible to the truth. But, it's like knowing what to put in and leave out was the challenge there. And then Susanna Jones on Earthquake Bird as well, had a terrific time with that. I actually do enjoy adaptations because I think it's really about, I enjoy adapting books that are not like so precious that everyone's waiting for every line of dialogue like Jane Austen or something like that. I like adapting when there's a freedom that there's been this tremendous creative energy by the person who's made it, and you sort of bring your creative energy and they can fuse together and you can invent. That's when I think I really enjoy adaptation. When it's not too strictly, it doesn't have to adhere too strictly to the original, but can enhance the original with a new kind of, a new creative force.
Do you have tips for anyone that is adapting and specifically taking something that's so internal, a novel that's so internal, and laying that out for a screenplay that has to be externalized somewhat?
I think just to bear in mind that a novel is long. It takes you hours and hours to read a novel, and a film is short. And just to realize that if you try and putting everything in, that could be just very packed. And often short stories make really good films because you can expand them a little bit. And sometimes it's okay to leave out whole chapters or whole storylines or whole characters. It's kind of, you've got to feel it as a film.
But also, Paul, it sounded like your question had to do with interiority of like the text, perhaps.
Yeah, especially like with books that are like interior monologues. But then can't be like that.
Right. So like something written from the first person.
Yeah.
For instance, that's the thing. There's the obvious thing, which is voiceover, which can also be amazing and isn't necessarily a cheap thing to do. It can be fantastic, but finding that, solving that approach, how you're going to deal with that is like the big question with that kind of text, I think. But we've all seen brilliant movies that are filled with, sometimes voiceover has a bad rap, I think, and people are like, oh, that's just an easy way out. And I'm like, yeah, tell me about, Goodfellas, tell me about Election, which my husband adapted, and that it's a whole bunch of people speaking from the first person. There's great movies that are written.
Badlands, the Sissy Spacek voiceover in Badlands, it's unbelievable. Like I rewatched that film recently, and it's without the voiceover, it's kind of like you can't imagine the film, 'cause it's such a crucial element.
Kubrick used voiceover and narration all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I forgot, now I want to see Badlands again, but I always think of the voiceover in Days of Heaven. That
which was, really integral to the whole film. Yeah.
Yeah.
Was it Linda Manz, I'm going to say?
Yeah, Linda Manz, M-A-N-Z.
Yeah, she was very young as well, right? She was, a very young woman when she did it, it has such profundity and really adds to the whole story.
Vocally, because it's kind of like maybe it's the way the wind blew through her head or something, like her accent, the graveliness, the sort of driftiness of the, you know, her memory of it and stuff. It's so
good. Tiffany Marie, to you, Wash, just says, hi, bonjour to Wash. She met you, she's from New Orleans, she met you at a Colette luncheon and just wishes you success.
Oh, thank you.
Tiffany.
Thanks, Tiffany Marie. I remember meeting you, and hello. good to hear from you.
For you, Tamara, Via Via, The Savages is one of my most favorite films of all time. Can you tell me a little bit about the process of when Philip Seymour Hoffman and Laura Linney came on board, and anything about your approach to collaborating on them with character, rehearsals, and directing them?
Oh, thank you so much. When they, I mean, you know, in the process of casting a movie, because we had a hard time getting that movie financed for lots of reasons, because it was about death. It was about middle-aged people dealing with death. Like, there was nothing sexy about it. But I had a hard time when I was at different companies trying to satisfy their demands for, you know, if we're going to make the movie, you know, we need, especially then, I don't even know, maybe life has changed since then, but, you know, at that point, the actors that you found was before streaming, before like a Netflix, which has way less attachment to the stars. That, I mean, of course it still matters, but it felt like, because it was 10 years ago, that it mattered more. I don't know. Do you think that's true, Wash?
Well, the streamers are less bothered about stars, yeah. So you can cast, you know, lesser known names in the lead, which, you know, is because they're not looking at the market value specifically, but whether the casting works for the project. So that is an evolution that I've noticed, definitely.
But anyway, the irony of it all is that when I was at a studio with the studio that had sort of financed the script, and I wanted Philip Seymour Hoffman, they did not think he was a star enough.
Whoa.
And it was right before Capote was in the world, because it had already started playing at festivals, but it wasn't post, you know, him having an Oscar, for instance. And so, like, people knew that there was this movie Capote, but they still said, you know, we need somebody bigger. And I was like, I felt so incredibly lucky that he loved it. And so anyway, Laura was first, but the only reason it kind of became that way was because I was at the studio and I kept having to go to actors that I knew would never do it, and I'd have to go down a list until I got to Laura. And then I was like, oh, you know, so-and-so is never going to want to do it, but I almost have to send the screenplay to somebody knowing that they will never do it, and that eventually I will get to the person who I think is the most right for it, you know? I mean, I don't know. Have you ever had to do that, Wash?
Yeah, go through a lot of people, yeah.
You go through like some notion of a hierarchy, not of your own, but of the world, of the studio in that moment, these people, and, you know, almost you have to like cross your fingers that like it doesn't work sometimes, even though they're great actors, but you know they don't fit. But it's
there is that thing, that self-convincing thing that happens when you're going down a casting list, because actors are so incredible and sometimes they can really surprise you. And you know, basically a lot of stars, you're never going to get an audition, so you have to look at their previous work. And, you know, you end up going on like watching these movies that you'd never normally watch. And I think the thing to realize is you don't have to see everything, you don't have to love everything they've done. You can see something in a performance that might be in an obscure movie, and the movie might not even be any good, but you go, okay, yeah, I can see something that they could bring into this role. So it's almost kind of like you've got to kind of search until you find that moment, but then you do start, you know, sort of self-convincing, and then sometimes find yourself a little relieved if you get a pass. You're kind of like, oh, it would have been a lot of work to get them there, you know?
Yeah. Whereas something else feels like a natural fit, and you just know that that's more like a more. I know.
It's nothing. I don't know if I have it actually. So there you go.
Wait, say that again.
Well, you don't know if you have it. That's the thing.
That's true. Yeah. So anyway, so in terms of Laura and Phil, I did rehearse with them in the smallest way possible, which was, I mean, they came to my apartment in the East Village, and that was like the first time I got to get them to, and the same thing happened with my last movie, where, you know, you're casting people that have never worked together before, and you feel like there's going to be a correctness, a rightness, a chemistry, a dynamic that will be right when you put them together, but you don't know because it's like taking two different ingredients and saying, I'm going to throw a little oregano in, but I don't know, I guess I'll put this pepper, you know, you think it's going to taste good, you think it's going to feel right, but you don't know until it's really happening in front of your face. So with the two of them, when they were in my apartment and it was like actually occurring, where I could feel that they were perfect for each other, all because they were so opposite in a way, because that was the nature of the roles, because the characters were so opposite, and that it was about these, you know, sort of mismatched people having to do something together that is very difficult. So that was, anyway, in terms of their dynamic, or that was me kind of thanking the gods that that following those instincts was the right thing to do.
Probably have time for one more question. For both of you, from Amy, just talk a little bit of, I mean, we could do an hour on this, I'm sure, how your films change from script through production to the edit, and if you can talk about any discoveries that you made in the process.
Wow. Yes, I think, sorry, my smoke alarm is going off.
Oh no.
The house is on fire. Yes, things in my experience change a lot from script to production to post, and there's the old saying that you make your film 3 times, and that has been true in my experience. And I, you know, initially when I started making films, I was very much like, the script you have to stick with everything you've written on the script. And I realized soon into working with Richard, who was very open to what actors would bring, that if you do that, there's a certain, and it works for some filmmakers, but that actors can bring you tremendous gifts because they are reading the script from this unique perspective, that they're owning that character and they're owning, you know, the actions and the thoughts of that character. And often they can bring you something that is really, really strong, like a great line or a take on a moment that's slightly different to how you saw it. And I always think it's really important to be open to the creative conversation on that. And then the editing process is so crucial to finding the shape of your film, and you often find whole sections aren't working, and then you move one scene into a totally different place, and it's like the jigsaw just completes, and it's like an amazing thing. And sometimes you struggle for a long time to find the right shape in post. And so my example will be on Still Alice. We had a completely different beginning, and it matched more the beginning of the book, and they were both getting ready to go out, and they were both having this kind of fun dialogue. So you saw they were this happy married couple, and she left her keys in the bowl, and there was no sign of anything wrong. So it was kind of like this, oh, you know, this is who these people are. They got in a car together, they went to the airport, they talked about a lot of stuff. And when we watched it, the movie didn't seem to begin until she started forgetting stuff. And so we completely cut that, like literally 6 or 7 minutes off the beginning. So we didn't have a beginning to our movie. And then we found this scene that was for much later in the first act that was a birthday scene. And we thought, oh, that's great. There's that moment where she doesn't kind of fasten on to the subject of a conversation in the right way. That's a great one to start. We started it, but it just started like you were literally tuning your TV in the middle of a scene. So we just held on Julie for as long as the shot would last. So it just opened on her and you just watched her and just hearing all the voices around. And it just works as the beginning of the film. It's like you're watching this woman, you're in her head, it's her story, let's go.
Tamara, any specific example?
I'm the opposite of, I've never done that. I've never gone like, oh, I'm gonna put the beginning at the end, or I've never done that, ever. I think that I am so, not because, I mean, if it was better, I guess I would do it, but I've never done it. Like they really match the screenplay a lot. I mean, I've excised a scene because it feels like it's redundant, but I've never restructured in an editing room.
Wow.
To me, the editing room is so much about rhythm, and that's what I'm doing there, like finding rhythm with the story. I mean, you know, I think that if I was in a pickle and it felt like I needed to, but I've just never done that. I've never reshaped something from, you know, like that level of deep.
Well, that's good, because it is stressful. And now, just having that experience, I always think, how is a movie going to begin? Like, obviously, it's the most obvious question, but really, really, really playing it through in your mind, because, you know, when people are looking at that blank screen and the movie starts, they could be seeing anything, right? And the jury is out, I think, in the audience minds, especially in the first 5 or 10 minutes, and then the audience kind of get into the film. But I always think that's the time where you have to be particularly careful about how you're setting it up and how the story is going to play, and the tone, what the tone feels like. Right.
This is I don't know, to whoever's listening, filmmaker people, I don't know, maybe have you ever seen this, Wash? It was like my favorite thing that I have seen. It cheered me up so much. It was so great. It's a Dick Cavett episode from 1972. And the guests are only directors. And it's Robert Altman. Who is it? It's Robert Altman, Peter Bogdanovich, Mel Brooks, and Frank Capra.
Oh my God, I want to see it.
You can find it online. It's amazing. The beginning starts sort of slow. So, you know, like Dick Cavett's monologue feels a little mushy. And then Robert Altman starts. And then as it builds and all these people come on at the same time. And the reason that I was thinking about it is because Capra is talking about Lost Horizons, which I've never seen. But he's saying that, you know.
With Ronald Colman, right?
Yes. I've never seen this movie.
Google that one. Okay.
But so he is, he's talking about this movie that they made that they're so proud of, that they love, and they go and they show it at a test screening, and it sort of tanks, and people are laughing at it, and it's a really amazing story of Frank Capra at a test screening, so sick that his baby, his child, can you hear me, Wash?
I can. I was just checking, and I was right. It does star Ronald Colman.
It is?
So anyway, I have seen that film. It's great, yeah. Is
it great? Okay, well, then you'll understand this better than I, but it's exactly what you were talking about in a certain way. So he has a test screening, and people are laughing at it, and he's devastated, and it's raining, and they're like in Santa Barbara. I don't know where the hell they are. But he's wandering around in the rain, and then he comes back, and then he has an instinct, and his instinct is to cut the first 2 reels of the movie. Wow. 2 reels, when that reel's like 20 minutes.
Yeah.
So that's like 40 minutes film. Yeah. And he plucks those 2 reels off, and he puts the title, you know, at the beginning of the last reels. And he said it completely changed his movie, and then it was a great movie or whatever. I don't know if it's a great movie because I've never seen it, but it was anyway, it made me think of what you're saying. It was about dropping into the drama instead of setting up the drama. That's what I imagine it is, even though I haven't seen it and I don't know what his lost reels look like. But it's a good thing to keep in the back of your head.
Yes, exactly. Because some films, I see them and they're too long, and I love them, but they're just too long, and I'm kind of like, you can you can shape it, you know, you can kind of affect its impact really radically.
Yeah.
And find the right shape for it, and not be too indulgent.
You think people would change the way their movies open nowadays when a lot more people are consuming stuff on a streaming service where another movie is a click away? It's not just you've rented that video or DVD, so that's the one you have to watch. It's like you've got so much choice, and people are so quick to just like, change it. You have to grab people quicker now.
I hate to think that when you screen a movie for people at home, you're competing against the phone, you're competing against, you know, whatever else is going on in someone's life, you're competing against the dinner that's popping out the microwave. It's kind of a really tough thing that you kind of almost have to shut it out and imagine everyone's at a film festival really concentrating on every moment of what you've written. I don't know how you do it otherwise, you know. It's interesting, movies are more front-loaded. I think, you know, when you see an old film and usually it starts with the title sequence, often like a pure graphic Saul Bass sequence, and I'm just like, so beautiful just to take that time to kind of meditate with just music and images and kind of get into the feel of the film before it starts. And that's almost like people a lot more grab the audience from the very first second, start right in the action, you know. That seems to have been an evolution that's happened since home theatres have become the norm.
But I don't know if that's because of home theaters. I think that was something that's happened in a kind of just modernization of the narrative in a way.
Right.
I too sometimes watch an old movie and I'm so like, oh my God, they spent all this time and they wrote this orchestral introduction and they are like gliding over, you know, some book pages or the way that the titles are, and it's creating an atmosphere that, I mean, it's so incredible and it's so different and slow, and it's like a play, because that's what plays would do. They'd have an orchestra play prologue to the play, the musical, for instance. There was always like, and it seems very old-fashioned and kind of almost connected to theater in a certain way. And sometimes I'm like, I want to go back and do that, because it really sets the mood. It's very beautiful. But I think it has to do with a modernization of the form of film, and moving from theater to film and using film in a more, I don't think it has to do with streaming. I think it has to do with, you know, like the new wave, you know, like taking film language and using it in a different way.
Right. And then the credit sequence ends up at the back, which also is like, next film coming up in 5 seconds. Basically, like, because, you know, the end credit sequence is really important, and you always choose a song you really love, and you always want everyone to see who worked on the film, and of course that goes pretty fast. That's
funny. In the end of Private Life, there's a crawl. Mm-hmm. It's a very, very long sort of held shot, and then the titles start to crawl over it, and I was so worried, and I kept asking, and it was made by Netflix, and I kept saying, but is it gonna like do that thing where it starts, because it's not over yet, like it's actually not over. Yeah. The shot isn't finished, and then there's a moment where the shot is finished and the movie's over, but the titles crawling over the shot is sort of part of the movie, and I was just sick to my stomach with that idea of exactly what you're saying, that the thing pops up and you're like the mood is trashed. You spent 2 hours. You spent 2 hours setting up a moment, let's say, and then it's like somebody just pulls the rug out and they flick the lights like you're in bed and making love, and then somebody throws the lights on and you're like, you can't see, and you're like, what's happening? It's awful.
Yes, it destroys the moment for sure.
That's for sure. Kind of takes the wind out of your sails.
We are out of time, but very quickly before you go, we always ask everyone for their pandemic picks. Anything you've been watching that you would love to share with people? It can be an old classic, hidden gem. Feel free to dig deep.
Okay, I'll jump in. I saw a film from 1977 called A Special Day, an Italian film with Sophia Loren and Marcello Mastroianni. I'd never seen it before, and it's kind of set during fascism, about the day that Hitler visits Mussolini, but it's all about them in this sort of modernist apartment building. Sophia's a downtrodden working class mother, and her minor bird escapes and lands on Marcello's balcony, and it goes from there. It's very unexpected and rather brilliant. So I loved that film. And I've also been watching Michaela Cole's series, I Will Destroy You, which has been blowing my mind in a very good way. I think she's a brilliant artist, and I've been very much enjoying that series. We
had guests recommend that a couple of weeks ago too. So.
Yeah, I want to see that. That's so funny. I think I read about A Special Day because, but I'm so. Do you know who directed it?
Ennio Pinto. I'm going to die though if I get it wrong. So give me a second and I'll tell you.
Ettore Scola.
Sorry?
Ettore Scola.
Oh, that's right. Ennio Scova, right?
Okay.
Ettore. E-T-T.
Oh, Ettore Scova. Yeah.
I found it on Fubo.
I know my film, you know.
If you want to hunt it down, it says it's on Fubo and Criterion. Right?
Yes, it's fantastic.
Yeah, Tamara?
So, well, anyway, am I on? Okay. So, well, please go watch that Dick Cavett thing because it's amazing. I watched it twice. Like, I was obsessed with it on many levels. I mean, obviously it's not a movie, but it's an amazing artifact. I mean, the clothing is astonishing too, but it's so beige and beige turtlenecks and, you know, whatever. But that's, you know, that stuff is really fun. But having these directors all together of different generations and different styles, and Peter Bogdanovich is in high swagger mode. And anyway, it's great. So that's one thing. I was trying to figure out, you know, I was watching a lot of weird things.
Ooh, have you been listening to the podcast on Polly Platt?
Oh my God, yes! Yes!
Peter Bogdanovich. It's really interesting now to watch the three films they made together. You know, Last Picture Show, What's Up Doc, and Paper Moon, with the backstory in your mind of what happened within that marriage while those films were being made. It's really fascinating.
So juicy.
Yes.
So good. I can't believe you're listening to that. I mean,
I always listen to Karina Longworth, but this is a really particularly great series, I think.
And also because it's her memoir, but that's so funny because I wrote that down. I was like, oh my God, I have to mention the Polly Platt, because it's Polly Platt's unpublished memoir, and Polly Platt is she was the wife of Peter Bogdanovich, but she was his creative partner, and she's a production designer, and she worked on the three greatest movies of his, and then many other movies. But wow, it's really compelling.
Yes, it really.
And I think it's why I ended up finding that Dick Cavett. Like, I saw something in Peter Bogdanovich, and then I was like, oh yeah, and then I wanted to see it, and he's in such. When you see it, you'll go, oh my God,
yeah.
Like, 'cause he's at the top of his sort of swaggery charm, but he's also like the kid on stage because he's the youngest director, and and every one of them loves movies so much.
Mm-hmm.
Mel Brooks, like, they all talk about movies in such a great way. I watched something that I had never seen before, but I always wanted to see, Vittorio De Sica's The Garden of Finzi Continis. Did anybody ever see that?
I love that movie.
So that was at the beginning of the COVID crisis. And I don't know, I watched it like in bed. My daughter was was like on Zoom school, and I don't know, my husband, I literally was like under a blanket, which is, you know, not the best way to watch something on a laptop, but I have to confess that is the way I ended up watching it. I think I had to watch it in 2 sections. It's very hard to find. I can't remember how I found it. It looked kind of crappy, but God, it was amazing. And it seemed so now in a way. I mean, it's a very different kind of quarantine, because it's like a Jewish family, a wealthy Jewish family walled in, and World War II is happening, but it hasn't affected this walled-in family. It's very romantic and strange. I'm glad you've seen it, Paul.
Yeah, Call Me By Your Name reminded me of that, because it's about this sort of idyll that's, is not going to last. And it's like the perfect time that is coming to an end, and you just feel it throughout the film.
Yeah, and that was it. I became very interested in that narrative device in another totally different movie, which I rewatched for just the hell of it, which is Shampoo. And they're both movies in totally different ways that are doing exactly what you're saying, which is it's happening, but the world is going to be changed, but they're still living in this different moment, and it's suspended, the Finzi Contini family. But we know as an audience, like, things are going to change, and this is not going to last. This life with this, like, intellectual, aristocratic Jews. It's so beautiful. And then Shampoo is, it's like the night before Richard Nixon. It's like right before, I don't know if it's formally exactly the night, but it's like Richard Nixon is about to become president. And it's this it's not as direct as Finzi Contini, because it's a different kind of movie, but it's like weighing on the frivolity of these people that are, hair people, and his life, and this kind of emptiness, and this kind of solipsisticness, and not paying attention because something bad is about to happen, which is a very interesting narrative device, and something that I was kind of messing around with in my own little way.
Julie Christie is so fun to watch in that film.
She's so great.
Yeah.
She's so great. I mean, he's
her.
so weird. It's so weird. It's so rambling, and it's great. It's very fun. Anyway, that's another thing.
It's amazing that the stature of directors that Dick Cavett had on his, like a show for a network audience.
I think we should do that. I think Stephen Colbert should have a handful of directors on, so it's not just someone like selling a book or something. You can actually talk about something. It'd be really interesting. Why don't they do it? Have
you seen all the Bergman interviews that Dick Cavett did on his show?
I've seen some of them, yeah. And Hitchcock was on there a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, and also that people are actually talking. They're actually talking. People are talking. Like, they're saying vague things that aren't articulated. And then sometimes they're really articulate. It's like we're talking, and there's lots of blah, but then it's to be on a talk show and watch people talking is incredible, because we never see it, because they're, it's scripted, and it's like tight, and, and this is
don't let people talk for long enough on those late night talk shows, so it's really about the hard sell, and that one anecdote, and it'd be so much better to really get to know a little bit about someone and have it more informal and a little more messy. Would be more interesting.
Yeah, I mean, you've seen.
My good, Tamara.
yeah. This could be our talk show.
Right.
But yeah, it is astonishing. You're like, this is 1972. They have these 4 direct, of course, all men, but whatever. That's just whatever. But wow, I mean, it's so esoteric in a weird way. But then it's Mel Brooks, who's, and just this strange. I don't know. It's like a fascinating thing that you would just never see now.
Or when Betty Davis comes on and just holds court for an hour, just like drinking and smoking and telling all these stories and barking at people. It's fantastic.
Yeah, my brother just said with the Betty Davis, is that what you said? Because you got Yeah, I need to say, I think I've seen like touches of that, but I haven't seen it full on, but I want to do that, watch those. Yeah, she's hilarious, and she's a genius. That would be fun to watch. But anyway, Paul, are we done?
We are out of time.
The last wrap-up phase.
I want to end this and add all this stuff to my watch list. A lot of stuff to get through now.
Yeah.
I want to thank you both for joining us. It's been great, but we have to call it a day for today. So Tamara Jenkins, thank you so much, Tamara.
Thank you.
And Wash Westmoreland, thanks, Wash.
Thank you, Paul, and thanks to anyone who's watching.
Hope you stay well, be well, stay healthy, and we'll come back soon and share when you finally, get out of this and make another movie. Come and share it with us.
Definitely. And thank you, Tamara. It's been great talk. I'll do an eyeline to Tamara.
Yeah.
Thank you, Tamara.
Or then I'm going to go.
Is that the right eyeline? Thank you, Tamara. It's been lovely hanging out with you.
Other way, Tamara.
Really? Do I have to go this way?
Well, for me, anyway.
Oh, really? Because in my screen, it's like this, but I think like this. I'm looking at my wall. Oh,
no, that's a very abstract. That's a very abstract way of doing it.
I don't think my lens is right or something.
All right.
But anyway, it's so great to see you.
Likewise.
I can't believe we both wear these shirts.
I know. It was meant to be.
It's very important.
Thank you both.
Okay.
All right.
See you soon.